Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to get started and talk because obviously your office was created in the aftermath of the Abundant Life Christian School shooting. And I want to talk a little bit about what this past year has looked like in the wake of such a tragedy.
Yeah, so our office was created by the Executive Order number 254, where the governor created the Office of Violence Prevention on January 4th of 2025. As you may be aware, it takes some time to get positions created within state government, but that time was spent drafting the basic parameters for our grant program, which we released the other week. I was hired in October to really start with the concrete moving forward with the grant program, and we can talk about the grant program later, but really looking to find different ways that we can prevent violence in communities across Wisconsin.
And I want to talk too, because this is not the first time we've seen an office come out of a tragedy like this. I mean, we saw former Governor Scott Walker create the Office of School Safety after the Parkland, Florida shooting. Let's differentiate these though. I think that it would help our viewers to break down, okay, we have the Office of Violence Prevention and the Office of School Safety. What does yours specifically do?
So at this time, we are working to connect the dots between different state agencies, different agencies at local government levels, and also the community organizations that are providing these services currently. However, that doesn't mean that we're not working with these organizations that are already in existence, like the Office of School Safety. You know, they are specifically charged with working on the school safety piece, but we're working with folks that are working on suicide prevention at the Department of Health Services. And I think the big piece about our office is we're trying to bring all those separate pieces together. We're really working on that collaboration piece to try to focus on having a whole government approach to anti-violence, to violence prevention and gun violence prevention. And part of that is also, as I mentioned, that grant program where Governor Evers allocated $10 million of ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds, to further communities' violence prevention and gun violence prevention initiatives.
And let's kind of walk people through, I know these grants kind of came online earlier this month. Walk people through how that works.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that is key to this is we tried to make it as easy and simple as possible. The intention was to make it as broad and open to as many organizations that are providing violence prevention and gun violence prevention services, including suicide prevention. If you go to our website, under the Department of Administration, the Office of Violence Prevention, we have our grant announcement, which walks you through what types of services are allowable, what programs can apply for services. It walks through the different program categories of suicide prevention and firearm storage, evidence-based violence intervention and outreach programs, criminal justice-based systems initiatives, domestic violence prevention initiatives, and finally school-based programming. So folks can look at that announcement, then head on over to the application instructions to understand how to submit their application in DocuSign, and then there are convenience copies that they can walk through to see the narrative questions that they will be entering in DocuSign. So it's really, hopefully, just a couple of steps process where they're looking at the grant announcement to understand what they can apply for, and then submitting their grant application in DocuSign.
And since you've opened these, what does the response from the community look like?
It's been amazing. Last week we had a webinar on the grant, and we had over 300 attendees to the webinar with lots of interest from a broad type of groups. At this point, we only have about 9 applications submitted, but the grants aren't due until January 16th, so we have some time.
And I want to talk too, because I think when you think about a state agency for violence prevention, why is this something that the state should step in and be a part of?
I think that is a wonderful question, and we're seeing that, you know, there is such change at the federal level to what sorts of grants are available for violence prevention. So we're seeing states that are stepping up and really putting a priority on ensuring that there are funds allocated for violence prevention. And I think the important piece about a state agency is that we can work with the local violence prevention offices, we can work with other state agencies, and again, this whole government approach to really make sure that we're not duplicating efforts and we're leveraging the services that are currently available and the funds that we have available to try to meet the needs of our communities.
And this office hasn't been without some pushback. I want to kind of read you a quote here from the Assembly Speaker, Robin Voss. He was quoted by the Associated Press saying that this office was not well thought out, and it amounts to a whole bunch of touchy-feely bureaucrats that are going to go around wasting time, wasting money, and certainly not putting the effort where it's deserved. What's your response to that?
I think it's unfortunate. However, I think the effects of violence prevention efforts speak for themselves. We have measures that are performance measures in place that can measure the effectiveness of these grants and see the outcomes. This work has been done before, and we know that it's effective. And we have, again, agencies across the state that are doing this work and are making an impact on their community. And the point of this office is to expand that reach so that we hopefully see less violence and hopefully one day, don't see the mass shootings that we're unfortunately seeing across the country and across the world. So it's unfortunate that they feel that way, but I think we'll speak for ourselves when we have the grants awarded and we can see the impact that they have on their community.
And I want to talk to, as we head into 2026, what are some key priorities for your office?
First priority is getting the grants awarded and making sure that they have the support in place to carry out their objectives of their grant, and then measuring their effectiveness. I think getting feedback on what is and isn't working well. As I mentioned, that collaboration not only with state agencies, but across all areas of the state to really make sure we understand the needs that are facing Hayward and the needs that are facing Milwaukee or Prairie du Chien, like we were talking about off air. Thinking about the whole state and not just being a state agency in Madison telling them how they should administer their grants or what's going to work best in their community. It's really listening to the community, telling us what they need to effectively prevent suicide, prevent gun violence, and violence in their communities.
And since your office was created just a year ago, are there resources that you're still asking the state legislature for right now?
At this time, we're only have one-time funding from ARPA, and that funding ends December 31st of 2026. So beyond that, we don't have any funding lined up. So it would be, helpful to have additional resources allocated from the state.
And I know that that's an issue that the Office of School Safety faced as well, was one-time funds, small funds going into the office, and something that some legislators have pushed for, gotten pushed back. Is that something you're anticipating too with your office? Is a little bit of back and forth with the state legislature?
There's no telling. I think what is really critical to understanding is, again, we're seeing a fluctuation at the federal level, and programs are experiencing this fluctuation of unreliable funding from both the federal government and from the state government, and that's leading to challenges where they're having a hard time keeping staff because staff need something that's more secure, and again, that ultimately impacts communities. So what I would hope is that we can see long-term stable funding so that folks can rely on this funding in the future and know that there's going to be a consistent opportunity to apply for the funding. Part of what shaped the grant program was the governor's budget proposal, which included long-term stable funding for the Office of Violence Prevention. That didn't get approved and didn't get passed, so I think what we are hoping to see is some sort of consensus and collaboration across party lines that we can have long-term funding for this office.
And I just kind of want to quickly go back to those grants really quickly before we wrap up here, because I know that they're due on January 16th, I believe. Correct. You said. When are we going to start seeing the rollout of that and the implementation of that money in actual communities?
Yes, so the anticipated announcement, we hope to take January and part of February to review those grants. It also depends on how many grant applications we receive, and hopefully make tentative award announcements in February and execute the awards sometime in March. So again, they have as much time as possible before the grant funds end at the end of December to perform the activities and the services that they are applying for.
So it's hitting the ground running in 2026?
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that we're really hopeful with grant funding is having that broad range of applicants, because we know violence prevention looks so different in communities. So hoping to see schools applying, after school and out of school programming, domestic violence programs applying, and as I mentioned, hoping to see some suicide prevention programs, whether that's with firearm ranges and retailers, or if it's community-based training, and then ultimately, criminal justice-based programming, and then evidence-based violence intervention and outreach programming, whether it's in a hospital-based setting or in a community-based setting. There's just a broad range of applicants that apply, and we're really hoping to see all types of agencies applying across those categories.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.